Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Well, your dean earlier said that wasn't good enough, but he let you slide, but I'm not going to because you've just eaten. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you. So, I know you're awake, at least now, and I'm not going to try for the next 50 minutes. I brought the kitchen timer, so nobody has to worry that I'm going to talk for too long. I'm going to let this start to run. If it starts to beep, we'll all know that I'm talking too much. I'm going to try to leave about 10 minutes for questions. Okay, here we go. So I decided today that I would change my name to Steve. That way, no matter who you talk to in terms of being on the program, I'll fit right in. So Steve Henry Thompson, at your service. So today, I'd like to talk about something I have a passion for, crops for health. This is not a presentation for you to get information. I like to always have this Yeats quote. It's not about filling pails, it's about lighting fires. And my hope is today, I'm not going to say things that you agree with, and it's going to get you to talk with your colleagues and discuss things, and from that, epiphanies, light bulbs can go on. That's the reason I'm here. So I'm going to start. This is the title of this conference, How Food Impacts Human Health. If we were to say cancer as the target of that human health, let me tell you something, folks. Nationally and internationally right now, I was just in London last week, so I can confirm this from the European perspective. There is no impact of food, ingredients, or nutrients on cancer. No impact. We're here for no reason. That should get some people talking. Now, there's a few of us that probably disagree with that. But I want to take you back in history for just a minute. 1994 to 1998. Although this is from the World Health Organization, and it's from a much more recent publication than 1998, I want to get you to think about the fact that many people think that fruits and vegetables are so important in the diet that they will save lives, lots of lives. And in fact, I do clinical research as well as work in the laboratory. And I work with physicians in the private practice, and they said, Henry, make sure you don't bring us any intervention that will do harm. And in 1994 through 98, FiveaDay Program was coming online. It's really 5 to 9 or more. And the person at the National Cancer Institute helped to get this program off the ground, Jerry Ann Heimendinger, was where I was working, AMC Cancer Research Center. And I said, Jerry Ann, how did they decide 5 to 9? And she said, Henry, you don't really want to know the answer to that question. It wasn't about science. There were other reasons that it was decided 5 to 9 or more. In 1998, we started a series of clinical studies, and I just want to give you one result. This is published, but I want you to kind of think about the results. So it was a clinical trial on breast cancer survivors. There was about 267 women that we got into one of two groups. And all the women for the first 2 weeks of the study were on a run-in diet. We gave them 3 servings of fruits and vegetables today. What's the average number of servings of fruits and vegetables that we're consuming? 2 to 3 servings. If you're a guy, it's more like 2. And if you're a woman today, it's like 3.4. We haven't made much progress since 1998. But we gave these women, these breast cancer survivors, a low fruit and vegetable diet, and then we randomized them to continue on the low fruit and vegetable or go to high fruit and vegetable. We measured oxidative markers. Oh, fruits and vegetables are antioxidants, right? So we measured a couple things, oxidative damage to DNA, but this is urinary excretion of 8-isoprostane F2 alpha, which is still considered one of the best biomarkers of lipid peroxidation. Look at this data, folks. This is time on the study, the run-in diet, right there. 3 servings of fruits and vegetables. Getting them onto a normal diet, but low in fruits and vegetables, did the greatest good in terms of reducing lipid peroxidation as measured in the urine. This is the difference when you increase fruit and vegetable intake from 3 to 12. Not only that, if people came in low, they stayed low. So there was only 25% of the population that accounted for most of the good. I haven't pushed on this very much, but in 1998, Walt Willits Group at Harvard started publishing a series of papers which have been echoed by other groups in the world saying, you know, at least for breast cancer, that fruit and vegetable thing doesn't look so strong. Oh my goodness, this may be a surprise for some of you, I hope not. I believe we have a plant food health conundrum. Why? We say eat mostly foods of plant origin for things like cancer prevention, and if it's for cancer prevention, I'll show you a slide in a minute which suggests it's also for obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease prevention, as well as cancer prevention. Yet, for cancer, this prestigious group, Steve Clinton and I have helped out this group over the years. No convincing epidemiologic evidence that any specific type of plant, food, vegetable, fruit, or grain, or nutrient inhibits any type of cancer. That's the current opinion. Why? I thought a lot about this over the past 10 years, and where this takes us to is why we started Crops for Health and Biomedical Agriculture. Most people today in leadership positions in our government and perhaps around the world would say, well, that's because plant foods, in fact, don't have any effect on the development of chronic diseases like cancer. But then there are some of us who say, well, maybe, but you have to be open to that. Maybe that is true. The way humankind eats plant foods, they don't have an effect. Or maybe it's the way scientists measure plant foods that it doesn't have sufficient ability to detect effects on health. But it is a conundrum. We cannot sit and just think that plant foods are going to fix the problems of the 21st century. Crops for Health was developed about 8 years ago at Colorado State, and it has ideas that we're trying to test. That varieties or cultivars within a food crop differ markedly in protective activity. I'll give you an example. Eat an apple a day. Does it matter if it's green, gold, red, blue, pink, purple? If you talk to most people, they say, no, just get them eat an apple. And it goes to everything else. Nutritionists, I'm a trained nutritionist, so I can say this. It's like everything's created equal when it comes to health within crop. Is that really true? You plant people, is that really true? Maybe human eating patterns lack sufficient botanical diversity. Well, wait a second. I do what Mom said. She said eat variety. But wait a second. You look in and find out how you define fruits and vegetables. They're culinary definitions. Maybe we've got it wrong. Maybe we should do like the botanists do and define diversity in that terms. I'll show you something that I bet you haven't seen. It's the food tree of life that we eat from, but from a botanical perspective, not from the food guide pyramid. And I'm going to spend a lot of time on this. Oops, fruits and vegetables. Maybe there's something else that we should focus on. Trying to put this together. I heard this morning, oh, we better do disciplinary work. We better do interdisciplinary work, multidisciplinary work. I say to you, to solve the plant food health conundrum, we need a transdisciplinary effort, which means you bring your disciplinary skills. It's different than interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. You bring your disciplinary skills in. I'm a trained biomedical scientist. I'm a scientist. And I am in a department of horticulture. Go figure. I think it's very logical. I'm just a scientist who wants to solve this problem. That's what being transdisciplinary means. It's kind of like taking what your dean said this morning to the next level. Everybody needs to play this game. And I was at a poster, and it resonated this. The consumer's important in this, folks. They need to be part of the research scheme because they will drive what we do in the laboratory and what is offered in the marketplace. It needs to be a way of thinking about the food system where we come up with different approaches and innovative solutions. And most recently, a dimension of this needs to be, and hey, by the way, it needs to be energy independent, environmentally sustainable, food secure, and human well-being optimized. And you know, the world's focused here. What about our health? How can we do this? This is a big, hairy, audacious goal. If you've read Jim Collins, you'll know about BHAGs. It's a miracle because the reality of it is obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and cancer are now being recognized as a metabolic syndrome, if you will. They are interrelated diseases. They're interrelated because they all share at the core of their pathology altered glucose utilization, altered cellular oxidation, and chronic inflammation. And at the heart, if you look at the pathology, I love pathology, you will see alterations in proliferation, death, and vascularity. And we can, and it is published, link them all together through signaling pathways. If you're working with one, you're working with them all. So if they tell me that plant foods are good for heart disease and not cancer, and they believe that adamantly, it's like, how can this be? Oh, Henry, that's a bunch of garbage. That's what your reaction is. I don't believe that. They're not related. I had to go to Paris last year, and I figured people would challenge me about that. They actually didn't. But I did a little experiment. This was you wouldn't see this if it didn't work, but that's okay. So I went to the Centers for Disease Control, and I dug out their maps for obesity prevalence. Oh, that's Colorado, and this is Mississippi, the South. Low prevalence, high prevalence of obesity. Some people know Jim Hill. Thank Jim Hill for Colorado being so low in its prevalence of obesity. But prevalence of type 2 diabetes, low, high. Presence of deaths from heart attacks or cardiovascular disease, low, whoops, high. Deaths from cancer, low, high. It's a coincidence, I'm sure. Is it? I put this slide here. I use it as the commercial sometimes for Crops for Health. I think it's fascinating that I've been able to take, I and my colleagues, mostly me traveling, been take the story I'm sharing with you to these various places in the world. And you know what? People in agriculture are excited about this. And I find an awful lot of the skeptics are in the biomedical sciences. And I started thinking about that, and it's like, we need to do something different. Transdisciplinary. I'll show you how we're doing it at the end, where we get people in agriculture and people in the biomedical sciences to truly work it together. Not just once a month meet or have an annual conference, but really interact. And that's my university president said, this is Henry's hobby. So this is my hobby. I'm trying to figure out how to do it. Rethink the model. That's what I say. First of all, I believe food science is wonderful and important, and we need to take advantage of it, but I think we've lost sight of the important fact that food is the vehicle of choice for delivering health-promoting chemicals to the human population. And I think for some reason, measurement reasons, we picked fruits and vegetables. Now I'll put on my pharmacology hat. Bad choice, people. Why do I say that? Because we still, despite a national and international effort, we eat very limited amounts. And you know what? The chemicals that people think are important that they try to put into tablets to make money, they have really miserable bioavailability. It's a really poor pharmacologic choice. The alternative that I am here to proclaim about today, staple food crops. Harvest Plus got this idea about micronutrient fortification for the developing world years ago. We in the chronic disease prevention community haven't been watching. Why staple food crops? First of all, you have to say, do I remember what they are? Rice, wheat, corn, common bean, or pulses, which common bean is an example, and potato. For 10,000 years, civilizations of the world have used these in pairs to get to where we are today. Truth. In the last 60 years, we've abandoned them. And in fact, as a nutritionist, you think, oh, keep people away from these. Why are they important? From a pharmacologist point of view, eaten in large amounts every day, eaten in large amounts, eaten every day, eaten by populations of the world, and people, we can afford them. In fact, they get the bad rap because they are so affordable, but it's true. Take advantage of them instead of saying that they're bad for us and try to keep people. Potatoes, nutritionists, a registered dietitian goes, oh no, potatoes, right? No, let's get that out of our mind. I'll talk about that more in a second. I'm going to show you a little data. So I do lab stuff. I do this kind of stuff, do all kinds of stuff. So I work with the rat. Just meet John McGinley. He's worked with in our lab for 20 years. I use a model for breast cancer shown here. This is a breast cancer, all kinds of pre-malignant lesions. We choose the model because it has a lot of similarity to the human disease in many aspects. And the data I'm going to show you, I'm going to drill down and then come back and be superficial towards the end of the talk. We set risk high. We all have risk for cancer. We set risk high in the animals by giving a carcinogen, and then we start interventions after the carcinogen has been metabolized so we can study the effect on the development of the disease process. So, you know, that was carcinogenesis 101, the model system that we used in a nutshell. Meet Mark Brick. Mark Brick is an internationally recognized common bean breeder. Meet Matthew Thompson. He was the graduate student that actually coined the name Biomedical Agriculture, and yes, his DNA is related to mine. He is now at Hopkins, finishing up his MPH and working as a cancer prevention fellow. And I hope he takes crops to health to the National Cancer Institute. But this is a common bean, a dose response. So these are all the beans, and there's a lot more. And anti-cancer activity, that's the first question. We picked one, an heirloom bean, red bean, and fed increasing amounts in the diet, dose-dependent reduction in cancer incidence, cancer multiplicity, and tumor burden. Oops. Are all beans created equal? Of course they are. Mark Brick gave us a pile of beans to evaluate, literally. We didn't know about the genetic origins of the beans. He looked at the data and he said, oh my goodness, Henry, you need a lesson in Phaseolus vulgaris. And it turns out Andean beans, which are genetically distinct from Middle American beans, like navy bean, white kidney is Andean, twofold difference in activity. That's the tip of the iceberg, people. We're only scratching the surface in terms of tapping biodiversity, natural diversity, to identify varieties that have potent anti-cancer activity. But you say, this is not important. This is food. John Milner of the National Cancer Institute said, Henry, if you can show me a food is better than an ingredient, yada, yada, yada. I said, I'll do you one better, John. I made this slide up for him. This is a head-on comparison of bean, highly tolerated. For those who know breast cancer, tamoxifen is a drug that's used both in the adjuvant setting and in prevention, although women don't like to take it. At the maximum dose we can feed to the rat in the model in which it was developed. Bean, tamoxifen. Equivalent effects on incidence, multiplicity, and tumor mass. I'm not saying substitute bean for tamoxifen. I am saying here's a food with potent activity. Are you what you eat? I got interested in metabolomics with the help of Steve Fisher at Agilent. We took our tissues to their laboratory in Santa Barbara or Santa Monica. Meet Megan Mensack, postdoc in the laboratory, who's now in industry. From those same study in which we showed the data for the cancer, the diets we fed to the animals using LC-MS technology and profiling, completely distinguishable. But more importantly, I could take any rat, look at its plasma, and this is unsupervised cluster analysis. You can tell by the plasma, by the breast tissue without cancer, and even the tumors that are failures are chemically distinct. Oh, you say, well, if some is good, more must be better, so white kidney bean must have more of something. Everybody thinks that way. Megan and I, because this is profiling, looked at the classes of the chemicals present. White kidney is the most effective anti-cancer form, right? Red bar versus navy, which is least effective, green bar. Oh my goodness, less is more? Meet Vanessa Fitzgerald. Vanessa headed up our bioactivity guided fractionation program with C. elegans. We said that lifespan extension would be a good thing, like cancer prevention. And we did extensive fractionation of bean. And lo and behold, white kidney extended a lifespan more than navy bean in the acidic and basic fractions, but not the neutral fraction. And in the chloroform fraction, it actually shortened. I show this to plant breeders and I say, well, that's like rapeseed oil. To get it to be canola oil, it wasn't putting more things in, it was taking things out. So there's now two determinants. If a plant breeder wanted to go after the protective activity that they could go after, things that are better in more and things that are better if they're not there. How does it work? Everybody wants to know. Where's the magic bullet? Folks, it's about the food. Bean is the magic bullet. But everybody wants to know the chemical. But it's about bean. Now, as it turns out, bean inhibits cell proliferation, increases apoptotic death, decreases vascularity, and it's published, and I'm not filling your pail, I'm trying to get you to think. We have published data that shows that glucose utilization is improved, markers of chronic inflammation are decreased, and cellular oxidation is reduced. Now, this is provocative for those who might know what's going on in the clinic. I'm working with biguanides. We've done profiling, and 50% of the small molecules in bean are nitrogen containing. When I talk to somebody about bean, they want to know what flavonoid, not nitrogen containing, is responsible for this effect. Biguanides are nitrogen containing. We are mining phaseolus right now to see if there are naturally occurring biguanides, because I can take this scheme, and we've now published this for bean and for metformin, and I can put the word metformin in here and show the same effects, because there's a signaling pathway. It's called the mammalian targeted rapamycin signaling pathway that is affected by bean and biguanides. I want to stay with the food, but I think there's a unique chemical basis for the protective activity that we're seeing. Why is this so important? For 10,000 years, we have had pulses in our diet. 60 years ago, the Green Revolution began. Maybe a little bit, maybe Green Revolution was 40 years ago. We went to diets that would have, on average, 200 grams per day, and in many regions of the world, they still have it, to 10 grams per day in this country. There's an awful lot of Americans that have no pulses or no common bean in their diet. Moreover, FAO says most people don't realize that the pulses are grains. When you say whole grains, it's not just cereal grains that we're talking about. It's cereal and pulse grains. The FAO recommends a ratio of 2:1 for cereal to legume grains. Since the Green Revolution, we've gone to 8:1, and they are basically non-existent in the American diet. What people who are vegans do is they substitute soy products frequently, or if they're omnivores, animal has displaced bean. Why? It's affordable. It's poor man's food. We shouldn't eat it. That's happening in Brazil right now, which has been one of the big bean producers and big bean consumers. I was down there this past year. They are trying to figure out how to reverse that, because there are health benefits associated with this staple food crop. I like to call it a contemporary food deficiency Those in public health would say it's an unrecognized opportunity, and I mean a big opportunity, and it's affordable. My picture's worth 1,000 words. It's a sleeping giant in the field. But it doesn't stop there, folks. So Colorado State's fortunate in having a lot of really high-quality plant breeders in the staple food crop area. Scott Haley and Pat Byrne, they work on wheat. I'm going to give you, this is the superficial part of the talk because I just want you to know some information you may not think this way. Each of these products is from a genetically distinct type of wheat. All wheat is not created equal. And in fact, we got wheat of various types. Wheat is diploid, tetraploid, or hexaploid, so big differences genetically, from different parts of the world. And we did metabolomic profiling on it. And what we were able to show is that durum wheat, soft wheat, and hard wheat are chemically completely distinguishable. That's as the beginning, and we've published this in PLOS One this past year. Now, I don't believe this data, and this got published a month ago in an ag journal, but I presented it because it gets us to think. Diploid wheat is still consumed in the center of origin of wheat, which is in the Middle East. If you take wheat consumption and overall from FAO website, cancer incidence data, you see a weak positive relationship. But if you limit it to the countries near the center of domestication for wheat, you see that flip around. It turns out that only small communities eat that ancient diploid wheat with the whole. It's a huge difference in what they are experiencing when they consume wheat. So meet Shawna Matthews and Meenakshi Singh, and these fine folks, plant breeder, wheat breeder, and a cell molecular biology student. We had 30,000 years of the process of the development of wheat growing in our greenhouse about 2 months ago now. We harvested the seed from all these varieties, and Sean is developing a new in vivo using the rat filter to screen wheat varieties for health benefit. Now, I had a discussion last night. I threw this slide in. So, big deal, Henry. You can't do anything with that. I talked to Conagra. Conagra says, if you show us the wheat that we can grow in the field, we'll maintain, identity preserve that variety. We'll put it in a bag. We'll get it to Whole Foods. It's possible to do. We have a world-class potato breeding program. Meet Dave Holm and Cecil Stushnos. Cecil's recently retired. They're responsible for some of these beautiful potatoes, the purple ones, the red ones, the orange ones, and other people around the country have been doing the same thing. I've tried to take Sastry and Jerome, two younger faculty members, and get them interested in digging down into the biodiversity. Potato genetics are complicated, and they don't want to do that. But again, because of last night's discussion, everybody wants to focus on those nice purple and pink flesh potatoes. That's the future. I think there's a lot in white flesh potatoes, which America's favorite vegetable is the potato. And so I say, use the Kellogg Foundation definition of a good food. Let's have a good potato, and let's go to its Achilles heel. And let's come up with a potato that's high fiber, reduced calorie, quick cook, with great texture and text. Well, Henry, nobody's going to want to eat that or grow that. So I presented this to the commodity groups a month or two ago. So those who have the high efficiency ag profit motive, the high fiber potato is likely to be very disease resistant because of the physical barrier that the high fiber, which is in the skin, presents. Show us more, Henry. Local and sustainable. We all know. I saw it in the posters out in the other room. There's a major interest in this. Have you seen the bags where people can grow potatoes on their porch, on their rooftop? And I was talking with one of your students. I want to know how many calories I can produce out of this basket, because we, the people, can complement high-efficiency agriculture and help improve food security. Corn! You heard all the bad play on corn, king corn, and you know, it is the economically most important cereal grain in the world, not rice, not because of its food, it's used for its ingredients. I was in Australia when I had the discussion with the people. It's either SIP or SIA. I think it's SIP for corn. But they had their leading breeding team. And I got up after them. I said, we need to rethink corn. We need to focus on health benefits. How can we get it back to food and not just the ingredients? Then I discovered from people who were working in high-efficiency agriculture that we can identify varieties that differ in their caloric content by 40%. You're a consumer interested in reduced calorie corn? Maybe. Good for the public? Take advantage of it if we can. And just to give you an example, I have a corn breeder in the laboratory. She's actually just recently leaving. She's got a great job in Hawaii. I have to go visit her. I said, Adrian, I'm from the Philadelphia area, so you can play with Adrian, but I won't. And here are the varieties that are ancestral, pre-corn. We can grow them in the greenhouse. I'll show you in just a second something that surprised me in terms of their content. Meet Jan Leach. I noticed over here you have somebody in rice. She's a world-class plant pathologist. Works right upstairs from me in rice. And Jan introduced me to folks in Erie. And Jan said, Henry, you can have the biodiversity of all of rice. Here's Erie's core collection. And I got samples of all of it. But obviously we're trying to do a little bit too much if this is my hobby. So I handed it off to two junior faculty members, Tiffany and Elizabeth Ryan. Elizabeth just got a $1 million grant from the Gates Foundation to study rice bran and its effect on the microbiome. We've looked at it as an anti-obesity agent. We have to eat it differently than it's currently done, and there's reasons why we eat polished white rice, but maybe we can overcome some of those issues. And we've also looked at its effects on longevity extension and in the cancer model. Meet Demas Echeverria. Demas from Columbia is a great chemist. He's working in the laboratory. He's a student. His wife's getting her PhD. And we have developed a fiber assay. And for all the staples, they're usually maligned because of their carbohydrate content. Well, folks, we need calories. But can we improve that? And Demas sent this is last night he sent this to me because I'm trying to defend the pulse community relative to the cereal grain community, because you need to have both in the diet. And this is what I found fascinating. I didn't have any idea. This is total dietary fiber. How high some varieties of corn are. Unappreciated, we've let them slip out of our diet. Dry bean is incredibly high in fiber. We're not taking advantage of that. So my university president, Tony Frank, says to me, Henry, there's this delegation from China coming in. I said, Tony, I have enough to do. He said, well, can you talk with them? So I did. This is fascinating because I took crops to health and the mentality I'm sharing with you to China. And this is Wei-Chin Zhang and Zongjin Zhu. They worked in, their MD PhDs, worked in my laboratory for almost 20 years. And this is Xiaoling Wei. And when I was there, I had the same thing. What about the diversity of tea? Oh, they told me about post-harvest processing. I said, no. There must be 1 million varieties of tea. I finally got through after a week. This is I knew because Xiaoling brought me in this huge leaf of the ancient tea tree. This is one of the ancient tea trees. Right about there is the center of domestication, and that's tea today. Gee, we've done a lot to make tea easy to harvest, haven't we? Have we changed anything along the way? Well, it turns out, as I talked more, there are 3 subcenters of domestication. And so now I have Chinese colleagues. We have an International Tea Institute at CSU, and I'm getting tea leaves, read the tea leaves, from all over China. And it turns out that it's not epicatechin gallate that we should be looking at, in my judgment. And I've talked to C.S. Young at Rutgers, and he says, well, Henry, it's a wild idea, but you deserve the chance to try it out. So we're looking at new chemicals in tea leaves that may have strong biologic effects, and they're bioavailable. So you got to kind of translate this to people. And we're trying to develop the Colorado cuisine for life as a modular diet that we can really show people a good approach to eating. And the epidemiologists would say this is nonsense because food is obviously not important for disease prevention, particularly cancer. And maybe they're right. So maybe this is a waste of time. But there you go. This is all the commonly eaten foods of the world, particularly in the United States, put on a botanical tree. And you can download this from our website. And so what I had the breast cancer survivors do, and they love the game, is they hang this on the fridge. And I say, the game is to see how many different places from the tree you can eat in a given day. The further things are from a point of view of pharmacognosy, the further things are in terms of distance, one limb from the other in the tree, the more chemically diverse they're likely to be. Chemically unrelated. So you want to complement your chemicals. Why? You're crazy. This can't be done. This was a clinical study we did. We designed diets, menus, and recipes for 2 weeks. I had this buried. At some point in time, I'll find the time to publish these so everybody can take advantage, where we had the powerful 5 botanical families. And if you folks are interested in this, you probably worked in the powerful 5. And we had the same 12 servings of fruits and vegetables from the powerful 5, or smaller amounts from 17. And we designed diets so every day women would eat from each of these botanical families. And we looked at effects on oxidative DNA damage markers and lipid peroxidation, and in all respects, mom's variety, not monotony, was the winner. So we're not sure if we're crazy, and we want to do animal studies before we take it to people to show that it actually works. And you can feed human diets to animals. We have done it with the Fred Hutch group. We'll be publishing that on glycemic load and glycemic index. I think you'll be surprised when we publish that. I won't show you that data today. But here, this is almost my last slide, and I've got 12 minutes left. So I'm from New Jersey, so I can cover the same amount of material in 30 minutes, 60 minutes, or 10 minutes. But I want you to think about 4 points. This is this is a new slide for you guys. I'm really concerned. I'm really concerned about what's going on nationally and the attitude about food and health. And I can give you a side story. So I'm in London last week, and this guy from Australia stands up. This is a really international meeting. I mean, people from almost every country I can think of. He says, so the animal data failed us. The animal data told us that fruits and vegetables would protect against disease. When are you going to own up to that? And I'm thinking, wait a minute, the human data, FiveaDay Program was based on human data. But it got me to think. And I believe that the epidemiologic evidence in the preclinical studies are a complete mismatch. Look at what you do in the laboratory. Look at what I do in the laboratory. We take ingredients, and we try to figure out if some pattern of intake that they'll look at epidemiologically does anything in the animal models. If you find a pattern and you're going to study it in a population, feed it to the animals. Oh, you can't do that. That's not good reductionistic science. Maybe they're right. I think that's wrong. 2, Another point, bean. I just showed you data on bean. Ancient wheat. Prospective studies of today are completely blind to recent shifts in dietary behaviors. Study all you want. If the American population isn't eating beans, you're not going to see an effect. 3. Oh, this one drives me crazy. But there's a lot of young people here. That model's terrible. Henry uses NMU, a chemical carcinogen. It's synthetic. It's not actually. And the model's totally relevant. Why? Because he didn't find the result I wanted. I have a friend at Baylor who's retiring, but he took this on early because it used to be for breast cancer, there were rat people and mouse people. And a long time ago, he published and he mentored me. He says, you know, Henry, all models illuminate some aspect of the disease. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because you don't like the results. There's this attitude, particularly in the population science community, the epidemiology communities, that the models are all terrible and they don't mimic the human disease. And I'll talk more about that in my second presentation this afternoon. I think this is a real problem, and I'm not sure how we correct this thinking, but our thinking needs to be broader. Finally, I'll submit to you, and this has not resonated. I put it right out there, last comment in this conference. I think it's time for a new reductionism at the level of foods. If we don't do this, I think we could lose a field. I've been in nutrition and cancer prevention since 1976. I've seen a lot of growth, and in the past few years, I've seen the field really suffering. This may be not the new thought that we need, but I hope it sure stimulates you folks to talk about it. So, how are we going to do this? This is particularly for young folks. Of course, I'm an older person that feels really young, so I think this is probably good for anybody at any age. We're trying to create an environment of transdisciplinary thinking. And we think there's a need to train people in transdisciplinary leadership. So meet Barb Warner, an educator that I'm working with, and with Biomedical Agriculture, which is what we call the field that's emerging, we're developing a competency-defined program. So we train to competence, not the course content. I was asked to give a talk sort of like this up at Washington State when they were getting together the researchers and their extension or their outreach folks. And they were talking about global to local. I would like you folks to do this. This is an action item. As your speaker, I'm allowed to give you an action item. Go to YouTube. In fact, some of you have computers, you can do it right now. And look up Daniel Pink Drive. And it gives a wonderful presentation on what motivates people, what gets us to be an engaged community. You got to listen to it. It's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. That's what makes our clock tick, not money. Not the dean saying, here's $5,000 more if you do something innovative. That won't work. Please watch Daniel Pink. And Steve Johnson's work on, so your dean said you want innovation. You don't get innovation by having meetings. I've had arguments with my dean, or my former dean, because he wanted me to move to this really cool place, and I would be away from the community coffee pot, water fountain, and bathroom. And my best discussions about crops for health have come in one of these locations, informally. The light bulb goes on, and then I capture the idea, and I know what to do with it. I'm not kidding. The English have the right idea. Tea time gets you out of your office so you just talk about whatever. That's where you're the best science. Not these planned meetings. And I've heard lots of other ways people do it, like, meeting a mate, except you're talking to another scientist, 2 minutes, and then you change. That's okay, but I like the informal way. Another one. So this is two parts. I talked about big, hairy, audacious goals. You've been challenged to have vision. I strongly recommend two great reads out of your field if you're a scientist. Built to Last and Good to Great by Jim Collins. And he has one great thing in here, and I find it so true in science. The genius of the end, not the tyranny of the or. An example. I see there's a local and a sustainable movement here. I come from Colorado, and in agriculture in Colorado, it's high efficiency rules today. And the people in New England want to have 60 to 70% of their food supply locally grown by 2030, and people in Colorado say, fools. I think we need to train students. The high efficiency agriculture is important because you can go on the other side and all those people are destroying the environment, right? There's these two camps. It's either you produce it yourself or you just go to the supermarket and you go high efficiency agriculture. You know, folks, it's not an either or proposition. We need both for global food security. But our mentality pits us against one another instead of take advantage of the end. And that is the only way that we'll get to energy independence, environmental sustainability, food security in a human health optimized way. How you gonna do it? This is a great read. I like these guys. They talk to me. This is a synthesis. So I work a lot with behavioral scientists, but this is a wonderful synthesis of the behavioral literature, how to get people to change when change is difficult. You need to direct the rider, our heads, guide the elephant, our hearts, and shape the path so that the elephant can get to its destination. There is wisdom in this book. I do weight control in overweight and obese women. I use Switch. I'm going to show data this afternoon, and Steve Clinton's aware of it. We have extremely remarkable success because we learn from this read. Finally, you need to be able to convince your dean that you got something cool. He's going to ask you for the elevator speech, right? The 30, 60, or 90 second. A lot of medical schools, maybe you folks are already doing it, are teaching Made to Stick by the same authors. So, I've given you a talk today. And I had a dean candidate that was on the dean search committee. He says, okay, Henry, what's the elevator speech? I said, hey, dean candidate, I'll do you one better. He didn't become the dean. I'll give you a picture. What I've talked about today is better food, every person, every day, the world round. Somebody recently said, but my grandma, she wouldn't be motivated. I said, grandma's version, healthy food, healthy living. What grandma wants to know, natural, affordable, delicious, and nutritious. One of the things about crops for health or biomedical agriculture, people have to toy with it, touch it, run away. This is the short list of people who have been involved. They're not all actively involved now, but that's okay. It's an opportunity to draw people into this creative environment to come up with new solutions to global health problems. And with that, I'll stop and answer any questions that you have.